One of the most immersive things you can put on your flight simulator is an avionics panel, for the simple fact that you get all that tactile feedback and the touch and the consistency of just knowing where everything is. Now, VirtualFly sent us their full G1000 suite and the mount for it, and in this video we are going to unbox the whole thing. We're going to go through the process of building it up, and we will get it onto the test sim right here. And the things we want to look at with this are how easy is it to set up, how easy is it to get it up and running, does it work well on both Microsoft Flight Simulator and X-Plane, and how does the actual quality feel, the build quality, because this is one of the, I would say, higher tier G1000s. It's a little bit more expensive than some of the others. Not the most, but it kind of sits in that upper mid range. So first we'll get to unboxing this and we'll have a look at exactly what is inside. Trusty Allen key. Let's just try and gently coax it out. I'm just gonna rip this box open. So yes, this is a G1000, and again, like I said, typical VirtualFly packaging, plenty of protective foam. It's actually lighter than I thought it was going to be. And there we have it. Very, very nicely finished, and I thought it was a glossy display in the beginning there, but there is a protective cover on that. Yes, that is a matte display. Very nice. Important to note, VirtualFly do state you have a warranty for 2 years on this. And these actually look quite heavy, but they're really quite light. So this is essentially what you're going to get in the VirtualFly G1000 suite. Again, very, very nicely made, but we'll definitely get to the sort of build quality aspect of it later in the video. I think right now what we need to do next is get this desktop support unboxed. So it is an all metal bracket. It's a kind of, I don't know if you can see that there, it's a kind of dark grey type of colour. It's got the nice VirtualFly G1000 logo on it. Can't tell if that's some sort of vinyl or whether that's laser engraved. I don't know if you can see that. So what we'll do now is we will get all of that crap all cleaned up. We'll kind of organise this a little bit more. We'll put the G1000 together inside the bracket, and then we'll start to configure the desk setup. I was actually going to save this for later, but I want to get the sort of first impressions of the build quality out the way before we actually start building this thing up. Now, the first thing that I actually noticed was the quality of the rotary encoders. And what's most apparent is the consistency of what the actual encoders feel like. The next thing would be the quality or the high-end feeling sort of range thumbstick there. Probably one of the best ones I've felt on a G1000. Then the next thing would be the sort of the material they've used, the plastic material they've used for the surround. Even on close inspection, you can see it's very, very well finished off. Now I'll give you a little bit of a closer look at it there. Hopefully that can grab some focus. Now you'll also see there, while I've got it, it looks like a glossy display, but it is in fact a matte display, and we can just peel that, we can just peel that off right now to reveal that. And you'll see it's way more diffused with that light. So any bright lights in, any bright lights in the background, it's just not going to show up as a reflection or as much with this matte display. Now, we will talk about colors and viewing angles later on in the video, but that's not really relevant to the build quality and the design. One other thing is this is fairly thick or wide. Now, that might change the way you have to mount this on your own system if you're not using the VirtualFly stand. So just take that into consideration. Make sure you double check those measurements on the website to make sure that that will fit. Now on the back, I did notice there is a switch for PFD to MFD right there. You've got your USB and your HDMI. There's a VGA, or what looks like used to be a VGA port, and your 12-volt adapter in on the back there. Overall, it's what I was expecting for that sort of price point that you're going to pay. Most of the niceties I think they've poured into the actual feel of the buttons. Again, we haven't really seen the screen yet. These have all got nice tactile sort of clicky feel to them. But there is actually something with the buttons that was a bit unexpected. And it's when we want to compare it to the likes of the FlightSim Builder that I've been using for a long time. But we'll get to that later in the video. I think we'll jump on and we will get the frame built up, and then we can slot these G1000s into the frame. So just a couple of observations before we move on. This is a metal mount. It's fairly solid, although it is a little bit flexy in that middle portion. Whether that's going to be an issue once everything's locked up, I don't know. Now on the bottom, you do have these rubber feet, which is nice, and you can also see where you would screw it directly to a desk. So as we've got it here, this is now ready to take the G1000s and the audio panel. Now these G1000 monitors just slipped in like an absolute glove into this frame. It's definitely a really nice finish overall. One thing that is a little bit weird though is there's countersunk holes for the screws. Yet the screw heads are still a little bit large to fit flush. So this is what it looks like all fitted up. Now on the back, there are these sort of spring clips. Using the wing nuts, they just tighten up and hold the audio panel in place. So this is it all mounted up. And I think most people would say, including myself, is this looks pretty cool. The frame's got a really nice sort of grey colour to it. And one thing that I did notice and tested is that sort of flex in the frame that was there previous to these being mounted and locked in. That's kind of almost completely gone. Another thing I really like about the way this is coming together is how compact it is for a simple desk setup. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to get this thing in place. We're going to get it all wired up. We'll get the sims updated and some of the other controllers and peripherals all set up ready to go. So this is the test PC that we'll be using. This is a 4090 with a 7800 X3D 32GB of DDR5 RAM. And what you're looking at here is a 45-inch LG ultra-wide monitor. Now it's not 4K or 4K in height, it's 1440p in height, which comes in handy when we start to talk about performance. But these are completely separate things. One of the neat things about this particular style of monitor is one, we can move it up and down, and two, the actual shape of it kind of fits quite well with what we're going to be putting underneath. And That, of course, is the VirtualFly G1000. And that to me right there looks absolutely phenomenal. So just a little bit of an explainer to what you're looking at here now. There is one power supply, and that is daisy chained through the three products, and two HDMI cables. Now, the only thing I think you'd have to look out for here is the amount of HDMI ports you have in the back of your graphics card. I'm kind of lucky, I've got two HDMI ports and three display ports. Now I'm using one display port for this monitor, which leaves obviously two HDMI ports, which means this will work absolutely fine. You might find yourself in the position where you're one HDMI port short. And if that happens, you can always try and look at some sort of USB to HDMI converter, or you could route one of the screens into the motherboard HDMI. So you've got a couple of options there. I've just dimmed the lights here so we can get a better view of what we're actually looking at. Now, the first thing that I can see is the viewing angles. The viewing angles are absolutely incredible on this. Now, the second thing I've noticed straight away is the consistency of the backlighting through every single button on the actual unit. My experience with the likes of FlightSim Builder, there was always little pockets of inconsistency with the backlighting, but on the VirtualFly G1000, it's completely flush the whole way through. So all we need to do now is get the USBs hooked up and get the VirtualFly software downloaded, and then it's time to start the simulator. Now, one of the things that you do get with the VirtualFly software is simplicity. This literally took me less than 2 minutes to download. I got it up and running straight away. It immediately connected, if I look at the dashboard, to the G1000. And when I come in here, I get some basic or simple options about turning the backlight on or off. You can see the PFD, MFD, and audio panel states are connected. And there's also a PFD2 if you wanted to run another one on the other side. And that's really it for the software. There's not much you can do. It's super simple, and as long as you have that running in the background, you're sweet. This part of the video was supposed to be Microsoft Flight Simulator first, but as usual, the issues you might encounter popping out panels in Microsoft Flight Simulator, I very quickly just had enough of it. So let's look at the way X-Plane does it. Now, one thing to note here is that you must have the VirtualFly software running before you start X-Plane. So now we've got X-Plane running. I think we're in an SR22. You'll see the view there, and we've lined the top of the glare shield up with this, which really looks quite nice. But the simple way to get this running in X-Plane, I've just done such a fantastic job with this. You go into the graphics panel, select monitor 1, which is the one on the left, change it from unused to G1000 PFD pilot, and bang, up the PFD comes. And then monitor 2, we will go MFD, and again, there we go. Super quick, super simple. You'll do this once, and every time you load into an aircraft, or this SR22 for instance, these will just appear. There's no popping out, there's nothing to do. And I can't commend X-Plane enough for doing such a, what seemingly feels or looks from the outside such a simple thing, but it's just such a great quality of life update that they introduced a few months ago. So I'm absolutely loving that. We talked about the viewing angles. That was one of the things we mentioned that this does an incredible job with. No matter where your eyes or the angle of your eyes down on the monitors, there's really very little color washout. The monitors are plenty bright enough. And like we spoke about earlier, the backlighting is incredibly even across the entire panel. The buttons, sorry, not the buttons, the rotary knobs and the dials, this is where I would say there was a big difference between what you might expect to get with a FlightSim Builder. That's the unit that I've had most of my experience with. These knobs and buttons and rotary encoders, they're much more stiff and concise. You're definitely not going to move any of these by accident. There's hardly any latency at all with it, not that I can detect in any sort of visual sense. And you can see me pulling the heading knob, and you can see how responsive that actually is there. Now, I did mention something at the start of the video, and that was something unexpected with the buttons when comparing it to the FlightSim Builder. Now, the VFG1000, all of these buttons along here, this bottom row, I don't know if you can see that on that camera, the buttons along the bottom row and all the buttons on the sides of the panels, those are all plastic buttons. On the FlightSim Builder, those buttons are all rubber. And actually, I prefer the clickiness of the FlightSim Builder compared to the VirtualFly, and I prefer those rubber style buttons. However, they do the exact same job, but that's one of the key differences from what I can see and feel in the build. The screens, as you can see here, run at 1024 by 768 and they're default to 60 Hertz. Although we can run this up to 75, I'm just going to leave it at 60. I think that's absolutely adequate. So the setup with X-Plane, crazy simple. Straight out of the box, download the software, run the software, and you are up and running. Very, very easy. Now I want to talk about what it's like with Microsoft Flight Simulator, because it's a bit of a different story. So this is us in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now there are two ways to get these displays up and running. The first one, you can right alt click on the pop-out display and it pops out, you drag it on to your screen, which is fine, it works, but it gets a little bit old kind of quick. And the other is the pop-out panel manager, which you can set to automatically turn on, and it will pop the panels out and into place. But it's not always without its problems. In fact, more often than not, it does have them. So I'll show you what happens to me when I use this plugin. So we started it up. It's gonna just take a second to start up. Then I can start the pop-out. And then you cannot move the mouse. You want to let this kind of do its thing. And you'll see it's popping out the PFD and the MFD. Everything looks good. But no matter how much I try and tinker around with the configuration over here, and now I'm getting some sort of screen flickering. I was getting that a couple of days ago. It's happening again. I think it's to do with pop-out panel manager. But we just need to keep rolling on this. So you'll also see on the MFD, there's two black bars up along the right-hand side, and on the PFD, those black bars are actually along the top. Now, I struggled to get some real consistency with this. It's, for me, never been something I can just click a button with and bang, it's done. I'm always, or always have been, dealing with issues with pop-out panel manager, even right back to Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. So in terms of experience-wise, compared to X-Plane, it's a bit of a ball ache, and there's no other way to put it. And that's nothing to do with VirtualFly. It's all to do with Microsoft Flight Simulator and this plugin. But the important things are all exactly the same as they are in X-Plane. Geez, I'm going to have an epileptic fit if we don't get this finished first here. Those important things, input lag, I don't see much at all. Very similar to what we get in X-Plane. Everything that I try just works exactly like it did in X-Plane. You'll see it matches up with what we're pressing on the G1000. But overall, once you get past the headache with the pop-out panel manager and just the way that Microsoft Flight Simulator deals with this stuff, it's very much a similar experience to X-Plane. Now, I'm going to have to switch this off now. This is driving me mad. See, that tells me there I've just exited out and that stopped. There's something going on with pop-out panel manager. The VirtualFly G1000 suite is, I've just got some notes down here, just over $3,200 US. That puts it firmly in that upper mid-range bracket. Other options might be the Real Sim Gear or the Aviatech, which is even more expensive, but it's up there nonetheless. But when compared to the FlightSim Builder, now the FlightSim Builder comes in at $1,750 US there or thereabouts. That is a fair difference. That's like almost, or it is about $1,500. So the VirtualFly is by far not the best value on the market. That trophy lives with the FlightSim Builder version. But I want to go through what we're actually getting for that higher price and the key sort of differences. Now, the first thing I want to mention is the setup is extremely simple with the VirtualFly software. Although FlightSim Builder, in my experience, have a very good software package too, so that's not really what I would call an advantage. The next thing would be the absolutely stunning viewing angles on the actual monitors themselves. These monitors are by far the best that I've seen on a G1000 setup, especially when we're talking about consistency of illumination across the actual panel. The next point would be that they do have extremely even backlighting. Now that's something I pointed out on the FlightSim Builder, that there was pockets of, or some areas which weren't quite catching the full backlight. That is clearly not an issue on the VFG1000. The rotary dials are absolutely superb. They feel, as far as I can remember, just like the real thing. Now, I'm not a pilot, but I have had my hands on a G1000 before, and it feels pretty similar. They've got that very sort of clunky, deliberate click, very little play in the actual rotary action and the clickable function on them as well. And lastly, this G1000 suite plays a part in VirtualFly's overall simulator that is FAA approved. Now, I know this might be a grey area, and it also depends where you fly or are learning to fly. But if you're in the US and let's say you're trying to build a simulator to help your training at home, then the VirtualFly option is something that I would think about. Now, again, there's a large grey area with that. It depends on a lot of other things. If you want to build a simulator that you can log some sort of hours on. But if that's what you had in mind, then this is where I'd be looking. And that's where most of the value lies with this G1000 suite from VirtualFly. I would say this level of product is for the pilot or the pilot in training. Again, I don't hold a pilot's license, but I have had my hands on a G1000 before, and particularly the knobs and the dials feel, or from what I can remember, feel very realistic. But if you're not a real pilot and let's say you don't have any ambitions to become one, then there's only a few reasons why you actually might want to spend the extra money. And the first of those 4 reasons is you have an unhealthy obsession with the way rotary encoders and buttons might feel. And you want something that's as close to the real thing as possible. Number 2 would be if plug and play is absolutely essential. The third thing would be if you already own other VirtualFly sim gear, then it's kind of nice not to have to open multiple pieces of software to get your sim up and running. You can run it all under the one hood. And lastly, for number 4, if you want the best backlighting, the VirtualFly GF1000, sorry, yes, it is the VFG1000 certainly has it in that sort of regard. Now, if you're hearing those 4 things and you're thinking, yep, that's absolutely me, then something like this, spending the extra money, makes sense. But if you don't care about that stuff, I'd simply just recommend the cheaper, more sort of we say budget friendly, it's still expensive, but the sort of budget version, which is the FlightSim Builder G1000. And also, if you move up to the TNXi version, it's kind of got a few extra features that this doesn't, which opens the scope to the kind of planes you might want to fly.